All right, it was meant to be a full-on revolution, you know? The super aggressive, totally fearless new philosophy that was going to conquer the world of cricket. They called it Bazball. And for a while there, man, it really looked unstoppable. But then it ran smack into its oldest rival, and the whole thing just came crashing down. So let's get into it.
The Ashes. Yeah, that's the ultimate test. And the verdict? It was just brutal. Hopes weren't just dashed. They were, quote, destroyed. This wasn't just a loss. It was a total demolition, leaving pretty much everyone wondering, what on earth went so wrong?
And that really brings us to the big question here. What even is Bazball? And how did this strategy, this thing that looked like a surefire winner, just completely fall apart? That's what we're going to unpack.
Okay, so to understand why it failed, you first have to get what the idea was all about. And trust me, it was revolutionary. It was actually born from a moment of tragedy and a real desire to just change the game itself.
So here's the key thing to get about Bazball. It's not just about, hitting the ball really hard. It's a whole mindset. It's about getting rid of that fear of failure, playing with total freedom, and going for the win at all costs, even if that means you're way more likely to lose. And its roots are pretty personal. After the tragic death of Australian cricketer Phil Hughes back in 2014, McCullum made this vow to just play without fear. He brought that whole vibe to his New Zealand team, and they had a ton of success. So, fast forward a few years, English cricket is in a total crisis, so who do they call? Him, to bring that same magic.
The plan was pretty simple, but also totally radical. First, just let the players off the leash. Let them do their thing. Second, bring in these exciting, high-energy players from the fast 2020 format. And third, and this is a big one, completely change the goal. A draw? That's now seen as a failure. You either win or you lose trying to win.
And at first,
oh my gosh, it was a spectacular success. I mean, the contrast here says it all, from just one single win in 17 matches to 6 in their very first home season. They weren't just winning, they were absolutely dominating, completely confounding top teams like New Zealand, India, and South Africa.
But then came the Ashes, the ultimate test for any English cricket team. And this is where that whole fearless philosophy ran into a brick wall, a very experienced, very cool-headed opponent.
After it was all over, Coach Brendan McCullum was brutally honest. No excuses. He basically said, look, we had these huge ambitions, but we were just outclassed. Simple as that.
And this quote right here, it just perfectly captures the difference. From the Aussie side, you've got bowler Mitchell Starc talking about experience. He describes this calm group that even when things got tough, they just had the composure, the know-how to figure it out. It was old-school experience versus raw, new-school enthusiasm.
McCullum also admitted that the massive pressure of the Ashes, all the media scrutiny, and their own sky-high expectations, it all just kind of squeezed them. They were so desperate to succeed that they, in his words, got in their own way, and it ended up stifling the very freedom that Bazball was supposed to create.
And in the end, the coach took the blame. He said, when you lose that badly, you just have to put your hand up. The prep wasn't right, the mindset wasn't right, and well, the results speak for themselves.
So, okay, let's move past the psychology for a second. What about the actual strategy? This is where we get into the nuts and bolts of the tactical flaws that Australia and other teams managed to expose so well.
So there's this really cool concept called the Red Queen effect, and it helps explain why Bazball worked so well at the start. So picture a fox and a rabbit. If the rabbit suddenly gets way faster, the fox can't catch it. Well, not at first. Bazball was that faster rabbit. It was so new, so different that other teams just had no answer. But eventually the fox adapts, and in cricket terms, that meant opponents started setting deeper fields, bowling wider, and just patiently waiting for that high-risk mistake they knew was coming.
And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? A high-risk strategy is awesome when you're on top. But what happens when you're in tough, unfamiliar places, facing a world-class team that has done its homework on you?
A tour of India right before the Ashes actually gave us a huge clue. Just look at this data comparing England's approach to what New Zealand did. Their overall scoring rates almost identical, but how they scored totally different. You can see New Zealand hit way fewer boundaries.
And this is so important. England's entire plan was built on hitting these high-risk boundaries. New Zealand, facing the exact same tough bowlers, they adapted. They focused on lower-risk shots, just finding the gaps, running singles, and messing with the bowler's rhythm. England was aggressive. New Zealand was smart aggressive.
And all of this just exposed the core flaws, didn't it? The tactics were rigid. It was all-out attack, all the time, no matter what. That doesn't really work on Australia's massive grounds where it's harder to hit boundaries. The team itself felt unbalanced. Too much focus on batting, not enough on the bowling. And under real pressure from a disciplined team, that aggression just turned into recklessness.
So the Ashes' defeat wasn't just a loss on the scoreboard, it was a lesson. A real lesson in humility for a team that had seemed pretty much invincible just a few months earlier. So the big question is, where do they go from here?
For Brendan McCullum, the goals shifted pretty quickly from revolution to just redemption. The new focus became about salvaging some pride and, playing for the fans who'd stuck with them through the incredible highs and these devastating lows. Which leaves us with this final, really interesting question. Was Bazball just a flash in the pan, a brilliant idea that was maybe a bit too rigid to last? Or is this all just growing pains for a revolution that needs to learn how to adapt, how to be smart as well as fearless? The next chapter for English cricket, well, that's going to give us the answer.